So today we're going to learn about awe of Hashem. We always wanted to know more about what's going on there with the awe, the fear, this sense, this awe of being in Hashem's presence. This is one of the 6 constant mitzvahs. We're going to find out about it. And last week on Hindel sent, we have on our site, that little site that Lazar from Gali and I had us sign up on Lessons from Miriam. If anyone doesn't have the book and likes to look in, you can just open that Gali Lessons with Miriam and look in, or you can just listen. Okay, here we go. Oh, look at Fran. Hi, Fran. Oh, that's so exciting. This is an international group we have here. This is great. Okay, so a quick review. We are learning the 6 constant mitzvahs. This is a meditation. This is Jewish meditation that we want to daven from inside this cube. A cube has 6 sides, right? Everyone can visualize that, up, down, in the 4 directions. So on top of us, the first of the 6 constant mitzvahs is Emunah in Hashem. We did that. That's from Anochi. I am the Lord your God. The second one, to no heresy, no other gods. We can't worship our own ego as God. No, no, no. So that's that's below us. Lo yelecha. So that's 2 up and down. In front of us is the unity of God. We should see Hashem's unity in front of us. To our right is love of God. And now we're up to, we did a little bit last time, fear, which is to the left of us. We did love to the right. Now we're doing fear or awe. Well, different level. We're going to learn about the different levels of fear of God and how to have it, how to grow in it. Okay, so page 859, chapter 7, fear. To the left is the mitzvah, Va'ata Yisrael ma Hashem Elokecha sha'al me imach Ki'im liyira. And now, O Israel, what does Hashem, your God, ask of you but to fear? This is actually a quote from last week's Chumash from Akev, from Devorim, chapter 10, line 12. Okay, and in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe speaks about a great deal about this also. So this, the 5th of the 6 constant mitzvahs, is the mandate to fear God, or to constantly stand in awe of him. We're going to find out about that. Fear of God is the emotion that motivates the fulfillment of all the 365 prohibitive mitzvahs of the Torah. Okay, the fear that augments love. So this next line is very important. Fear of God does not refer to fear of punishment. We're going to learn that fear of punishment is not serving God, it's serving ourselves. But it's something to fall back on if we're just like in this terrible state, which is known as moichin tekatna, small-mindedness, and we're just not able to get some higher level of fear. The lowest possible level of fear is fear of punishment. In an emergency, we can squiggle that out, so at least we don't transgress Hashem's will. Okay, so fear of God does not refer to the fear of punishment, although useful to fall back on as a means of keeping ourselves from transgressing against Hashem's mitzvahs in times of spiritual immaturity when unable to arouse any deeper motivation. So this is like the most shallow, the most shallow motivation is fear of punishment. And we're, of course, since we're all gathered here, we're looking for deeper things, right? We're just not going to stay on that level. Okay, so fear of punishment is not really considered serving God. For if we fulfill Hashem's mitzvahs at the top of page 16, in order to avoid punishment, we are not fulfilling them for Hashem's sake, but for our own interest. So it's very important that children shouldn't be taught that fear of punishment is the reason to do mitzvahs, or that we shouldn't be taught that, because it's not even serving God. And we may as well serve God with our emotions. So that one is not going to work. Let's find out more. True fear of God is founded on the fear of severing our bond of love with him, our covenant of betrothal to Hashem. So this now we're getting closer. So it's fear of severing our bond of love. Now that is serving God. Fear of severing our bond of love with God. Thus, fear of God flows naturally out of the previous mitzvah to love God. If we truly love God, we will fear doing anything that might separate us from Him. This fear keeps our consciousness focused on God and prevents us from doing anything prohibited by the Torah. Okay, let's go over that. This is actually as far as we got last week. So if we truly love God, that was last week's mitzvah. I'm just going over this last sentence. We'll fear doing anything that might separate us from Him. We don't want to be separated from God. We fear to be separated from God. And this keeps our consciousness focused on God. I remember that was, there was just tons and oceans of things from the first book we learned together, Transforming Darkness into Light. But then in the last book, the Twinkling book, what I really got out of that was what's good for one's memory, remembering God. The more we remember God, and we want to remember God, life is much more meaningful when we remember God, right? So, and if we remember God, it can prevent from doing anything prohibited by the Torah. That does sound reasonable. Okay, so now we're up to new material. At first, this fear is not conscious. It's merely a natural component of our love for God. So this is an interesting idea. This is saying that the love comes first. We don't, and it's, we feel the love, we don't, so on a subconscious level, we don't want to be separated from, we don't want to sever this love of God. Eventually, however, after we have integrated the love of God into our daily life, now that sounds good, integrating the love of God into our daily life, we may begin to sense the initial passion waning. And this is when our fear of losing our emotional connection to God surfaces. Now that's interesting. Our fear of losing our emotional connection to God. Let's keep that in mind. We might not have been thinking about that fear that fear of losing our emotional connection to God. Since we recognize that our love of God is a product of our awareness of His unity. So now the mitzvahs are going in order. That third mitzvah, the unity of God, that leads to our love of God. This fear inspires us to seek newer insights into our understanding of God. In other words, learn more, which is what we're doing here. We've gathered here together to learn more. A few people could put their cameras on, please. That would, it's just there's something about seeing the people. It's just like real life. Oh, thank you. Yes, I like that. Seeing the people, it's like, okay, I won't explain. Learn more. So we have to always be learning more about God so that our passion shouldn't wane. By the way, next week, which is Rosh Chodesh Elul, or Motzi, depending on where you are in the world, possibly Motzi, Rosh Chodesh, we're going to have a Farbringen. We're going to have an Elul Farbringen, so get ready for that. This is just, and if you happen to be in Yerushalayim, I'm actually Farbringen live at 1 p.m. at Malchus, so if anyone wants to get that live experience. It's very rare to get that live experience. So if you happen to be in Yerushalayim looking for something to do at 1, come to Malchus on the corner of Yeshayahu, where David Yellen changes to Bialis. Okay, there's my advertisement. Okay, so let us continue. Fear thus allows us to transcend the limitations of our finite consciousness. So it's something that we can touch infinity through this awe of Hashem's, and being in Hashem's presence. Our fear of God thus joins in the process described earlier of transmuting love as water, natural, pleasurable love, into love as fire, unconsummated passion. Just to feel a passionate love of God. We might not have thought of that on our own without reading this book. Okay, so it was a footnote there that I circled 7, or it's a short one. In particular, the elevated evil inclination ignites the spark of love as fire, whereas fear of God ever fans its ardent flame. Now that is quite a sentence. I think I'll have to read it again. The elevated Yetzer Hara ignites the spark of love as fire. Now, I never heard of that idea before. Now, tell me if that's not cool. Use that Yetzer Hara to ignite passion for God. We have to find out more about this. Tell me if that doesn't sound exciting. Come on. Yes. Okay. Elevated Yetzer Hara ignites the spark of love as fire. And fear of God fans its flame. We have to get a little more love of God into our life. We want passion. Yes. So we're learning this right now. We're empowering each other. We're being empowered by Rav Yitzhak to be able to put this into effect. Okay. So as we ascend from level to level, each level of newfound love in time becomes second nature to us. And again, the fear of lapsing into the rut of complacency spurs us on to seek higher levels of insight with which to fan the flame of love. Okay, so first we have to get that flame going. Fire starters. We have to live. We're learning this to get that fire starter effect. And we don't want complacency. Complacency is like apathy, and everyone knows what's the difference between ignorance and apathy. I don't know, and I don't care. Everyone's heard that joke. Okay, so we don't want that. We don't want apathy. We don't want complacency. We don't want to fall into a rut. We want ever higher levels of insight to fan the flame of love. Thus, fear works together with love, the two joining to becoming the two wings of the soul that constantly elevate all of our good deeds, prayers, and studies. Now, this concept might sound familiar because it's in chapter 40 of Tanya, but I think somehow reading this really gave me much more a sense of these two wings, of this love and fear working together. I never quite had gotten that, as the fear of severing from the love, that they're kind of all related. And we have these two wings of love and fear that's going to, oh, I'm starting to take off. I'm starting to lift up here now. Can more people put on their cameras, please? It's a big mitzvah. It's a big mitzvah. You can come as you are. Nothing fancy required. Okay, I could see people aren't so interested in that, but all right. Oh, look, no, people are preparing. Thank you. It's a big mitzvah. Okay, so the bottom of page 60, the day corresponding to the Sphira of Gvura, which we know is strength, might, restraint. The consciousness of the left is the second day of creation, Yom Sheni, on which Hashem severed the lower waters from the higher waters. That's a strong word. Hashem severed the lower waters from the higher waters by means of the firmament. For the first time, created reality experienced existential distance from God, the creator. Now think about that. Let's go back. This is the second day of creation. Till then, no creation, no created reality experienced existential distance from God. The first day there was just light. There was no distance from God. But the second day, suddenly distance from God. The sages teach that to this day, the lower waters cry. We too want to be close to God, as are the higher waters. Fearing separation and longing to be close to God, creation cries out with all its might to its creator. Quote from this Tikkun Zohar. I'm just going to close the door to lower the dog barking sounds. I hope that helps. Well, you're living in the country, you know, you have these these natural sounds. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay. So we're on page 61. Just as fear serves to augment the intensity and passion of the flame of love, so does it serve to regulate our love for God. So again, this idea of fear and love working together. Implied in the fear of God is the apprehension of approaching him too closely, lest the soul be annihilated in the divine ecstasy of its passionate love for God. So we're not supposed to just die of passion for God. It's just as we learned in Pirkei Avos, it's a mitzvah to stay alive, even though it could be tempting, tempting to just become one with God. No, we have to stay in this world. This would negate Hashem's will, for he created every being with a unique purpose in life. Now, this is something children need to know. We each have a unique purpose in life, and everyone needs to know this, which cannot be fulfilled by any other being. Submission to Hashem's will thus means restraining our passion to the extent necessary in order to remain alive and continue to fulfill our life's mission. So we can't get too carried away there, okay? I want everyone to just remember that. Don't get too carried away, because we need to stay in this world to fulfill our unique mission. Okay. Here, fear creates spiritual equilibrium. Left, fear balancing right, love. So we have, on the right, we have love. On the left, we have fear. They balance us out. This level of fear, more in alignment with Hashem's ultimate will for creation than the previously described level of fear, is higher than the first and the root of the soul. So to explain what he just said, the first level of fear is our fear of being separated from God. Okay, so this let's go up. There's two sentences explaining the two levels of fear. So the first is our fear of being separated from God. Let's just spend 15 seconds together just trying to meditate on this fear of being separated from God. Just think about what that means for 15 seconds. Okay, so the first level of fear is our fear of being separated from God. The second level of fear reflects Hashem's own fear that the soul misinterpret its purpose. What does that mean, misinterpret its purpose? That we should think we can just leave this world and just become one with God. And no, we have to stay in this world. And Hashem has a fear that we might just want to become one with him and not fulfill our unique purpose, our unique mission. Such an important idea. I mean, it's something the Rebbe really wanted us to really get the idea that we have a mission. We have many things in common in our mission, but each of us has a unique mission, because only we can light up our corner of the world the way we can. Here, fear creates spiritual equilibrium. Oh, we said that. Okay. Very bottom of the page. We will presently describe an even higher third level of fear, the essence of standing in love in the presence of God. Here, one no longer experiences a distinction between fear of God and loving God. So I guess this is just awe. It just sounds great. Just feeling this awe in Hashem's presence. That makes life meaningful. Okay. Page 62, 3 levels of fear. Just as the flame of love exists at 3 levels of ascent to God, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might, so does its companion, fear, exist at 3 levels. I just want to, let's review together, for those who have the book, like to look inside, page 54, where it speaks about these 3 levels of love. I wanted to review this. We never actually reviewed this. So here's our chant. This is just listing the 3 levels of love from 2 weeks ago's Parsha Ve'es Chanun from the Shema. In particular, this mitzvah speaks of the 3 ascending levels of love for God, with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. The sages and Gemara Brachos teach us that the phrase "with all your heart," the word for your heart, levavcha, is spelled with a double bet, implying that we are to love God with both of our inclinations, with the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara. So this is, again, the Yetzer Hara is just sparking our passionate love for God, and we're getting that Yetzer Hara to love God in this lifetime. L'chaim. Okay, so with both your inclinations, with all your soul means even if he takes your soul, and with all your might means that with every measure that Hashem measures to you, thank him exceedingly. So we've been speaking about this. This seems to be one of the themes really of Torah Sanefesh, that all of the circumstances, every last one, each little blade of grass and the circumstances of our life are all for the kindest way for our soul to its mission, for our soul to experience what it needs to experience in this lifetime. It's all the kindest and most compassionate way. So this idea, okay, back to page 62. So now we're going to see the three levels of fear. The first one, number one, the fear that our bond of love will be severed corresponds to loving God with all your heart. When through the fear of God, we recognize the presence of our inner potential to sever our relationship with God, that is our Yetzer Hara. Now, isn't that an interesting definition of the evil inclination of the Yetzer Hara, the potential to sever our relationship with God? Don't you like that? I never saw such a good definition of the Yetzer Hara. What is it? I mean, it's the potential. We have a potential to sever our relationship with God. We might, God forbid, have done it at various times, but now we're entering the season of tshuva. So we can do tshuva. All right, so again, so it's saying that this first level, the fear that our bond of love with God will be severed. Okay, so the inner potential to sever our relationship with God, that is our evil inclination. We elevate this very potential to serve God. In the terminology of the sages, this level of fear is called the fear of sin. In Hebrew, yiras chet. So it's very interesting. So remember we said that fear of punishment is not even considered serving God at all. So the first level of fear, it's not fear of punishment, it's fear of the sin itself. It's fear of the sin severing our connection with God. Because we have the potential, we have a Yetzer Hara that could that's why it needs, we all get the idea. We have to have a good talk with that Yetzer Hara. Second level of fear, the fear to approach God too closely, lest one become annihilated in divine ecstasy, corresponds to loving God with all your soul, even if he takes your soul. So the fear of being annihilated in divine ecstasy. So let's just watch that, friends. I don't want any of us to be annihilated in divine ecstasy. Just stay in this world, okay? Because everyone, please nod in agreement that we're going to stay in this world. No annihilation in divine ecstasy for us. So even if he takes your soul, though we are always ready to sacrifice our life for God, we must know and take to heart that the few with the few exceptions of which are said be killed rather than transgress, rather than someone says, murder somebody or you'll be killed, then it's better to be killed than transgress. God, so to take to heart that it's God's will that we remain alive on earth to serve him. Even at times, in order to remain alive, it's necessary to transgress a precept of the Torah. Like we know that to keep someone alive, Shabbos can be broken to save someone's life. So even if we have to transgress a mitzvah in the Torah, it's very important to keep people alive. Okay. The very readiness to sacrifice our life for God's sake brings us to this level of fear, which is called the fear of God's greatness, yiras haromamus. In direct proportion to the experience of God's greatness, we must experience human lowliness. That's shiftless, that the theme, really one of the major themes of Torah Sanefesh. the recognition that God is in heaven and I am on earth to live here and perform his will. So let's go over a few ideas here. Okay, so here you can see, I think I've shared this anecdote, but I'll just share it again since it's short. When I was from the first few months I was in a class at Machon Chana, and the teacher, I guess, was teaching one of the chapters of Tanya, where it said that just how, we immediately would be giving up our life rather than not separate from Hashem. Also, we can use, it's less painful to not give in to our Yetzer Hara, even though it's painful not to give in, but it's not as painful as death, and we'd be willing to die. So this was quite startling because no one had mentioned up to this point, I was from 2 or 3 months, that you have to die for this religion. It was Shabbos candles, dancing around at weddings, and all of a sudden they're like springing this. Now that I've moved in, now that I've moved into Crown Heights, and shouldn't they tell the people right away, would you like to light Shabbos candles and die? And die for this religion? I mean, no, they don't do it like that. They sneak it on you. And you can see it's just taken for granted. Like here it says, like everyone knows that we're all ready to, though we are always ready to sacrifice our life for God. See, it's taken. So I guess we are. And we do daven every day. It's good to say Birkat HaShachar because it says, please God, don't test me. So I think that is a good thing to say. L'chaim, l'chaim. Okay, Yeres Haromimos. We're right up towards the bottom of 62. In direct proportion to the experience of God's greatness, we must experience a human lowliness. So this was this idea of shiftless. Okay, so shiftless, there's a whole chapter 30 in Tanya about it. And shiftless basically means lowering the ego so we don't feel better than other people. And then that whole space, if you recall, is filled with joy and Hashem's presence. So rather than a lot of ego, we lower the ego and get joy, simcha, and Hashem's presence. It's a much better space filler than ego. Also, shiftless, I find, is really, really good for mental health. Because people often confuse shiftless with low self-esteem. Low self-esteem is just like high, it's just like arrogance. It's just I'm in the center of my attention. And I might hate myself, but I'm still not thinking of God. I'm thinking of myself. So shiftless is like I'm able to put myself aside, albeit briefly, but at least briefly, and think about God. And thinking that I'm not better than other people is really very good for one's mental health. And people really appreciate it. They respond nicely. Okay. In contrast to the first level of fear, the fear of sin, this level, the fear of Hashem's greatness, implies standing in awe of him. However, the ultimate state of awe in the presence of God is that of the next highest level of fear, shamefaced fear, yiras boshus. And I would this one I would really translate as awe. Yiras boshus is awe. So awe is the experience of standing in the presence of the infinite one, feeling that he is all and all is he, and asking, who am I? So in Yiddish, they say Gott is als and als is Gott. And, so that's, it's all God. What can you say? It's all God, standing in the presence of God. Let's just do a 6-second meditation and feeling ourselves in the presence of God. Yes, I like that. I think it adds a lot to life, feeling in the presence of God. This corresponds to the level with all your might, for here, as all is God, all is a manifestation of perfect, absolute divine goodness and mercy, which again brings us back to when the Rebbe was a child in Cheder, and he would long for the Geula Shalema because we would see the truth of what it says in Yeshayahu, what the Navi says, Oda Hashem ki anaftabi. I'll thank you, Hashem, that you were angry at me. And we'll understand how all of the traumatic experiences of our life were all the kindest way that Hashem could give us the circumstances that our soul needs to grow, to purify, to whatever it needs to do in this lifetime. The circumstances of our life are all designed for us by Hashem down to the finest details. So all is a manifestation of perfect, absolute divine goodness. And when Mashiach comes, we'll see it. So now we're taking it a little, now we can still wonder, the Spanish Inquisition, the Shoah, how could it have been? And what we're going to find out when Mashiach comes. It's very exciting. Let's dive in a little harder. Okay, in bottom paragraph, in general, fear implies sensitivity. I guess awe implies sensitivity. In Kabbalah, the left creates boundaries. That is, we identify the other and separate ourselves from the other in order to objectively sense the other's independent existence. So I guess that can be quite helpful, because we don't want to be codependent. We have to be able to make a boundary and sense that someone else has their independent existence. So it's Yira that makes boundaries, like we learned on the second day of creation, Yom Sheni, that firmament, that was a boundary. That was the first boundary. We have to make boundaries. A rectified left continues to nullify the ego and self-centeredness of all the emotions of the heart. Fear most humbles the ego. Now, isn't that an interesting idea? When we're in a situation of actual fear, it is humbling. It is humbling, let alone awe, which is totally a state of shiftless, I guess. Okay. Therefore, it is the left itself that totally overcomes separateness in its continuous experience of Hashem's omnipresence and omnipotence. So the left overcomes. So it's very interesting. We can use it to overcome separateness. We can use it in a lot of ways. I mean, just the idea that Gevurah is strained and restrained. I mean, it has a lot of places it could be used. Okay, so I want to share something very interesting that I learned at a Farbrengen on this past Shabbos. I want to share that with my dear friends. So we were we had one of our guests was Chezi Denenbaum, an interesting person to bring with, who lives in Israel. And we were talking about tshuva since it's Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Elul. I guess the tshuva season is starting. You know, in 770, when starting Shabbos Mavorchim, starting Shabbos Mavorchim Elul, that's what I meant to say. This past Shabbos was Shabbos Mavorchim Elul. Next Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos and Sunday. But this was Shabbos Mavorchim, so it starts the tshuva season. When the Rebbe would walk into 770 for the Tehillim, on Shabbos Mavorchim Elul, the Hasidim would start singing Ksiva v'chasima tova l'shana tova u'masukam. So we're in that season of singing it, of saying it. But I want to share an idea from this Farbrengen, which is things we've been talking about, but the way it was said, I really got a lot out of it. Life-changing, perhaps. So we're speaking about, so we understand this doing tshuva for transgressions or mistakes. And I think that's what mainly we think of when we think of tshuva. But we've also spoken about the idea of doing tshuva for traumatic experiences that happened to us. We've spoken about this idea because tshuva is returning to Hashem, and traumatic experiences also separate us from Hashem. They separate us. So it's not that we did anything wrong. We're not doing tshuva on doing anything wrong. We're doing tshuva on the fact that we're separated from Hashem and we want to get close to Hashem. So when we're talking, so this was like this idea kind of opened things up. And then we were talking about redefining things. And so one of the basic idea is like from the past, if I can say this happened for me, rather than this happened to me, that's tshuva. I'm redefining the past. This happened for me, rather than it happened to me, and to be able to see how it happened for me, that's tshuva. When we redefine the past, it's tshuva. And we can do that. So through tshuva, we can actually change the past, through tshuva of redefining it, that Hashem did it for me. Because if he did it to me, then I'm a victim. And it's so unhealthy. We can see it hasn't really, the victim culture hasn't been really working out very well. It's much better to feel Hashem did it for me. And if we become deeper people and more compassionate people and less judgmental people, then, why define it? We don't have to define it as a trauma. We can define it as a catalyst for growth, which is a mind-blowing idea, at least to me. It's an absolute mind-blowing idea. Just the idea of redefining something is tshuva. Just the idea of doing tshuva for things that happen to us just opens up a whole new exciting avenue for tshuva, because tshuva is where it's at. Elul is where it's at. The king is going to be in the field starting Shabbos, and he's looking at us with a smiling face. And it's much easier to do tshuva. It's much easier to say, I'm sorry, to someone that loves us and is smiling at us, than someone who's mad at us. So this is the season. And this is the season we have to make the most of this time and use it to redefine the past. So we're going to speak more about this next Sunday at our Rosh Chodesh Elul for Bringen. So I'm just giving you a head start there. So I see this. Let's see, anything in the chat we need to know. Oh, What does Hashem's unity mean? That there's nothing else but Hashem. It's all Hashem. And we heard that there was a dog in California barking along with the dog in Israel. That's a very touching tale. I'm happy to hear that the dogs are also communicating. Not only the people, it's all of creation. So let's take that get well picture, because we want Rav Yitzhak to be well and strong and teaching us all the good things we need to know. So if more people put it out, finally, let's see those other people. Come on, Safta, Sandra, Diane, come back, Dina, come back. Sephora, let's put on those. DL, come on, put on your cameras. All right. 1, 2, 3. Great. All right. So thank you all very much. It's wonderful to see that we got to learn this chapter. So next week is the Fabringa. Maybe we'll do a little bit of Lo Sasaru. I'm very excited about that's the 6th and last mitzvah. We'll see how it all goes. So you could have your book not too far away if you have one, but we'll call it a Fabringa. L'chaim, l'chaim. Thank you all for coming and being here. Lots of love, lots of love. Kol Tuv. Everyone have a good week and a good month and only good things. Love you all. A good Tanakh.